the Winfield preliminary over 8 laps. And we expect them around the minute for each lap. And Gary Rogers beats Brock off the front row of the grid, and we'll go into the first corner in front position, and all those bumper bars are pretty close.
Gary Rogers leading down through this very tricky little downhill section, preparing to go up the very steep hill where we think Peter Brock may make a bit of a move. To Holden deal, yeah, there he goes on the inside. That blocks out the Gary Rogers Tirana as they go into the tight left-hander. Tricky spot there with dust being blown up the hill onto the road, making it rather slippery. Down into Calvin's and then onto this long back straight, where a little later on they come out from behind those trees and there's a crosswind blowing very hard, which must make it quite tricky to control the car into the braking area for Innkeeper. Bring him around to complete the first lap with Peter Brock leading from Gary Rogers and John Harvey. Gary Rogers loving the circuit. He preferred it even better in the rain yesterday. Bit of trouble on Friday, had an off which damaged the front suspension, but they didn't discover it till practice had been concluded yesterday. So they've had a bit of a job overnight replacing parts of the front suspension on that car 34 lying second. Peter Brock pulling away a fair bit, and as he should, with an original normal practice time which was well under Bob Morris's lap record here at Baskerville in the dry. Overall, the Marlboro team taking it in a little bit layback fashion, this being their last major engagement prior to the winding up of the Marlboro Holden dealer team. Peter Brock did get in a little bit of trouble actually once yesterday, very early in practice, and had a very unusual spin off the road at Calvin's corner. But today he's making quite sure that he's going to lead this race. Gary Rogers working very hard.
Peter Brock, Paul, seems to be making up a great deal of ground now on Gary Rogers, and John Harvey, the second Marlboro Holden dealer team driver, is actually catching Gary Rogers. So in the latter stages of the race, it could be that second position will be fought out by these drivers. You may have noticed that Murray Carter was in third position on the grid, that being because of the excellent practice time that he set in the qualifying session in the wet yesterday, but with his emissionised engine he loses out on horsepower compared with the other cars, and in the first part of the opening lap of this race he dropped back towards the rear of the field. But at the head of the field it's Peter Brock making no mistakes in the 05 Marlboro Holden dealer team car.
We have an unofficial time on Peter Brock of 58.55, which puts him over half a second inside Bob Morris's lap record.
Gary Rogers now coming under pressure, and John Harvey pulls exactly the same stunt that Peter Brock pulled earlier as he goes inside at Winfield corner, ready for that downhill swoop into Calvin's. Very evenly matched pair of drivers, John Harvey and Gary Rogers, particularly in this sort of sprint-type racing. Both these drivers love this type of competition. Certainly John Harvey loves belying his nickname in the Marlboro Holden dealer team of Slug. It's generally called that by the boys in a very, very easy manner. They don't really mean it, but he takes it all in good part. Gary Rogers having another bit of a dive at the back of Harvey, coming on the inside, but Harvey cuts him off.
Gary Rogers no doubt endeavouring to put himself in a position where he can try exactly the same move on Harvey going up Roadways Hill as occurred to him on the previous lap, but the power of the dealer team car driven by Harvey, now sitting in second position, was too much.
Well, the experience and the talent of the drivers makes it very hard for anybody else to tackle them, but of course next year it's a whole new ball game, as they say, with the team being virtually disbanded in many ways. There are doubts as to whether they'll run more than one car, and if they do, Peter Brock could be the driver, but again, that isn't even settled at this stage in the game. At least he has one more race after the Baskerville meeting, we think, in that car. It will be going to New Zealand for a big competition at Bay Park for December 30th. So right on the knocker at the end of their Marlboro Holden dealer team. Oh dear, Alan Brown having a major blow-up as he goes down towards Calvin's corner. Very, very big engine problem there for Alan Brown, the managing director of Recar. We're asking many of the drivers what they intend to do with their cars next year if they're not going to race them. And Alan Brown said that no matter what, he would never sell that particular hatchback. He wanted to keep it, even put it on his wall. There he is, having a quick look under the bonnet. I don't think that's going to reveal very much at all.
And last lap for the leaders, with Peter Brock unable to actually draw away from Harvey very much. But it'll be a Marlboro Holden dealer team 1-2 finish. Peter Brock down the hill.
Top line competition is always a good thing to do because timekeepers can sometimes make errors, although the timekeeping here at Baskerville is probably amongst the best in Australia, I would say.
Harvey's been pretty quick in the second half of the race after he got around Rogers. Not far behind Peter Brock, although Brock perhaps easing the car up. And there's the checkered flag, and there wasn't much more than a car length in it.
I'd say they must have some GMH photographers here, and that was posed for them.
What will happen when the flag falls is that Murray Carter will start just 1 second ahead of his teammate, and then the cars will go off as the stopwatch reaches their handicap time.
And the car on the second row of the grid nearly ran right over the top, but Murray Carter were away, and Rod Stevens, after nearly having a mangled back bumper bar, he gets away in second place, and Alan Brown just trying to jump the flag there a bit.
Reminds me of last week at Calder, when he did exactly the same thing. Well, Murray Carter, no problems at the moment as he heads up the Roadways Hill and into Winfield Corner. Remember, he's using a much less powerful engine than the rest, 30 or 40 horsepower down. There is Peter Brock, already battling away, nagging at the heels of the other drivers. Along the main straight goes Carter into Innkeeper Corner. A long sweeping left-hander completes the first of these 8 laps. He's trying hard, Drew.
And certainly Rod Stevens has been able to make no impression on him. That would be a good, more than a 1 second gap that he has on them now. And he started with only a second up his sleeve, so Murray Carter's doing pretty well.
I wonder whether Rodney will play interference for him.
I think it'd be one thing to catch up to Murray Carter and certainly another thing to pass him the way he's driving the Falcon today. It's a very big car on the tight Baskerville circuit. The Tiranas aren't big cars themselves, but they're still quite a handful on the twists and turns at Baskerville. Gary Rogers, the current picture now, a driver who went particularly well in practice, and he's catching up to the cars ahead of him quite rapidly.
Well, there's Murray still leading, doing it well. Little man in a big car with a very big heart. Down once more into Innkeeper for the second lap. Picking his way through the corner with Rod Stevens still there, ahead of Garth Wigston, Alan Brown and Graham Smelt. And there goes Gary Rogers, straight through on the inside of Graham Smelt, so he is now up to 5th place, sorry. Oh, big lock-up with the brakes there from Graham Smelt, and there are the 2 Marlboro Holden dealer team cars, not making the sort of impression they should in this 8 laps. Gary Rogers sliding the car around ahead of now of Alan Brown, and up to 3rd place already. It's beginning to look very good, is Gary Rogers in the green and white car, and there goes Graham Smelt past Alan Brown. Alan Brown obviously having a bit of trouble.
Hasn't been a good day for the Recar cars.
No, it certainly hasn't. And there we have Gary Cook ahead of...
in fact, Garth Wigston,
sorry, ahead of Peter Brock. It's very confusing with the Garth Wigston car and the Gary Cook car, white and blue, very difficult to pick at a distance. John Harvey sweeps past the Alan Brown car. The other two follow through as they enter innkeeper corner. Meanwhile, Gary Rogers is flying. You just saw him out of the corner of that picture.
And the sort of ground that the Marlboro Holden dealer team cars are making up doesn't suggest that they'll get there in 8 laps.
Well, if they do, you can bank on a record going very easily in this race.
Oh, both Marlboro Holden dealer team cars showing the effort with which they're being driven as they lock inside front wheels virtually identically, turning down into the S's. Garth Wixton between them was a little bit neater, but in fact a little bit slower. And now up the hill, it's John Harvey who's opened a slight gap on Garth Wixton.
Well, Wixton's battling to stay ahead of Peter Brock here. This is his home circuit, and boy, he's going to keep the road ahead. But Brock's chance comes on the main straight, taking the inside line so he can try and clip off Wixton, but Wixton knows the track too well. He'll throw the steering wheel and gear lever at him in a minute.
And a hand out of the window by Peter Brock. He's not too happy with Garth Wixton and tries to shortcut a bit.
Well, we saw Garth a little slower through this particular section of the course, and Peter had to lock up in a big way to avoid hitting him in the back. And there again, there you see it, as Wixton comes right across, closes the door on Brock. Brock is forced to brake, flat spotting that front right tyre.
Of course, so often we've seen Peter Brock weaving his way through the field, say in races like Bathurst, but they're cars that are being lapped. Now, Wixton here is not all that much slower than Brock, if anything, so he's finding it pretty difficult to get past the Tasmanian.
In the dry practice session yesterday, the cars were only a couple of tenths of a second apart, with Peter Brock being quickest and Garth Wixton being second quickest of all the cars, that being a practice session that was run in similar conditions today, yesterday afternoon in the dry.
Once again, this braking move into innkeeper corner, and again, Wixton pulls across. And Peter Brock will not be liking this one little bit. He's waving furiously out of the window, getting very cross. That red-gloved hand comes out, and now he's got the inside, but again, Wixton cuts him right off. They have different lines through this corner quite clearly, and Wixton's determined to hang on to his line, blow the Marlboro Holden dealer team.
I think it's probably just as well we're not patched into Peter Brock's radio back to the pits. That mightn't be broadcasted.
Well, here they're coming up now on Rod Stevens, so that's one of the very early runners slipping back down the field now. There's maybe a chance for Peter Brock if he can get in the right position and block Wixton in behind Stevens. But no.
And that's given Johnny Harvey a bit of a break over these faster cars. Maybe Harvey is the one to catch the leaders.
A tight situation there with Murray Carter. He's just getting a little bit out of the way, but not giving them very much. Now Peter Brock's got to get past him.
Harvey on the inside of Murray Carter.
Wixton still just in front of Brock. The two different lines there. Garth Wixton staying much higher for a quicker dive down into the S's than Peter Brock, who stays in tight. But the two cars still arrive about the same distance apart at Tilford Corner.
Now you can really see the effect of good handicapping as the whole field is closing right up into a great big high-speed bunch of cars.
They've now done exactly one lap behind Rod Stevens in the Briarwood Falcon, with this time Garth Wixton getting inside and through Calvin's Corner, and the way being left open for Peter Brock also. This time under brakes at the end of the main straight, possibly maybe the position for Peter Brock to make his challenge.
And this time he does it. At last he's managed to get that inside line, the one he was after, and through he slips. And has John Harvey in his sights.
Harvey still has Gary Rogers to contend with. And now on the last lap, with all the cars getting pretty close together, as Peter Brock pulls away from Garth Wixton.
Well, we haven't seen Peter Brock drive this hard for a long, long time.
Now we come back to the front of the race, and can John Harvey do anything from third place? But Harvey's gone too hard.
Gary Cook, the leading car in the Citizen Watches Tirana, with Gary Rogers in second position, barely behind him as the cars come round for the end of this handicap race.
So the two Garys, Cook and Rogers, across the line. Gary Cook the winner. And that would put Peter Brock in third place. Then Wigston and Harvey battling his way out of the dirt. Peter Brock and Gary Rogers on the front row. Harvey and Carter on the second row. So Murray, Carter and Rod Stevens flying the forward flag amongst 8 Tiranas. And again, Rogers beats Brock off the line. In fact, Brock slipped right back.
Very slow to start. He's recovered now to third position, with Gary Cook getting from right down the back of the grid into fourth position in his Citizen Watches car, just ahead of the identically coloured Phillips car driven by Garth Wigston. Gary Rogers keeping to the left, going up the hill, making sure that the Marlboro Holden dealer team doesn't perform the similar feat to that in the earlier race when both cars went past inside him in Winfield corner.
I think we're going to see some exciting driving from Gary Rogers, because when he's out front, he really throws that car around. So we want to keep our eye on him. He's going to be doing everything he can to stay out in front of the two Marlboro Holden dealer team cars.
In case you didn't see last week from Calder, Gary Rogers won a race during which he spun twice and still won it. So there's plenty of action to come yet from Gary Rogers if he keeps that up.
Well, he admitted to me this yesterday morning that was brain fade and nothing wrong with the car. And look at him here. He's holding those two red and white cars off as if, oh dear, cutting them off there. Oh, yes, he had to have that little bit of a miscue, and both of the cars have gone through to take first, second places for the Marlboro Holden dealer team.
John Harvey leading the more usual race leader, with Garth Wigston in the road race car spinning in the Tilford Motors corner and allowing Gary Rogers to be untroubled now in about fourth or fifth position.
Well, this is once again that familiar sight. But looks like they're going to have a little bit of a dice between themselves. Peter Brock takes the lead from teammate John Slug Harvey.
It's a position in which Peter Brock has been so often this year. And I suppose, barring incidents, it'll be very difficult to pass.
Gary Rogers hasn't given up. He's having a good throw around of that car, trying very hard to stay with these two. Sort of go for broke in this, which should be the last touring car racing of the season under these rules. Alan Brown's engine in that last race that you saw was totally demolished, believe me. But again, Alan wasn't too worried about it. He doesn't have any more racing this year to worry about.
Gary Rogers has indicated to me during the course of the day that quite obviously his engine isn't as powerful as the engines being used by Peter Brock and John Harvey, and consequently his only hope of being able to catch up on the dealer team cars is to either leave his braking very late or to drive his car very hard in the corners.
He's doing both here, that's for sure. He's using all the track and a little bit more, as you see from the little puff of dust coming up on the inside. Be a bit of a relief for Peter not to have somebody in front of him shutting the door all the time. We must keep an eye on the lap times in this too, because I don't think he's playing around.
The two Fords, Murray Carter in car 18, followed by teammate Rod Stevens in 69. Quite a climb up that hill, isn't it, Steve?
It's a very steep hill, and particularly in a car like the Falcon with a long bonnet. For someone like Murray Carter, who's not very tall, the apex of the corner disappears completely, and it's a matter of arriving up there very quickly, hard on the brakes, and hoping that where you've pointed the car is actually the apex of the corner. Peter Brock has cut the lap record that he set in the earlier race down to a time of 58.54 seconds, which shows just how hard he's driving his car when it's remembered that the lap record at this stage it was 59.23 seconds, set last year in the Winfield 25s meeting by Bob Morris, also in a Tirana.
Well, there he is, Peter Brock. heading the field, up the hill once more. Oh, and he's locking brakes. He's really trying. He's got the bit between his teeth, all right, and trying to show that if he did have any arguments in the last race, he was really the superior driver, and as if anybody would doubt it.
Superb year he's had, both on the motor racing circuits around Australia and in the Repco reliability trial. And virtually the only place that Peter Brock's come unstuck this year has been in Adelaide, where he lost the round of the Manufacturers' Championship with gearbox failure and lasted only about 4 laps. And he also lost the Australian Touring Car Championship in the final round on the same circuit to Bob Morris.
He's really hooking that car around those corners. It's an incredible feat by Peter with no opposition to be going this fast.
In unofficial practice on Friday afternoon, where there was no wind, the weather conditions were perfect and the track was considerably less slippery than it is now, Peter Brock recorded a lap time of 58.3 seconds, and he thought that was fairly quick, but looking there, 58.54 seconds in a race condition car running on a slippery circuit is really something.
And look at Harvey and Rogers. There's not much between those two. Rogers is driving probably one of the best races of the season in this company. He's really leaving that braking late as he closes right up on John Harvey's tail. This is quite a duel between the number 2 in the Holden dealer team and the Gary Rogers car. See Gary sliding the tail. He loves to do that. He loves to get a lot of movement in the car, sliding it around. He was telling me he absolutely loves the wet too, which of course is the time when he can do more of that. Oh, a little bit wide there. He miscued the corner, missed the apex, and that lost him quite a bit of ground to John Harvey up the hill.
If he can put Harvey under pressure down this straight down the hill into TAA, well, anything could happen. This is where Harvey spun in one of the heats of this Winfield series.
Once again, he closed up on brakes down into TAA, and he's doing the same thing as they come up to Innkeeper. Right up again, once more on the tail of the Marlboro Holden dealer team number 2 car.
This dice being run at such a pace that they're actually, I think, making ground on Peter Brock, who's probably eased the pressure on his car now that he's secure in the lead.
Well, they're catching him for sure, and I think it can only be because Peter has slowed a bit, realizing that there was no point in just keeping going as fast as he was. The chances of slipping off the track, of course, increase in direct proportion to the amount of effort being put into the driving at that speed. And look again, once again, it's on under brakes. He closes right up on John Harvey. Trying to be very careful that he doesn't make that miscue on the exit from the corner. We've just heard that Graham Smelt has pulled out. There he is, into the pits, into the dead car park. Once again, Harvey and Rogers. Harvey guarding the tail of Brock if he really needs it. I don't think he does.
And Rogers was very slow out of that corner, losing a lot of ground to Harvey. There could be a problem here with Rogers' car.
Yes, he's slowed right down. He's out of it. He's pushed the car just a shade too hard.
He's able to hang on this last lap of the 9-lap event. It'll be possibly still open to Gary Rogers to secure 3rd place in this Winfield 25s final. But 1st and 2nd positions will go to Peter Brock and John Harvey, driving for the Marlboro Holden dealer team.
Peter Brock in front of teammate John Harvey down the main straight.
The checkered flag. It's 05 Peter Brock, followed by 27 John Harvey for the Marlboro Holden.
Sweeping into the start-finish pit straight. And checkered flag for Peter Brock. Well, Harvey drew right up on the inside, and it was about half a car length.